Never forget this. The most dangerous person in your neighborhood might not be the criminal down the street. It might be the man who thinks he's in charge of keeping you safe. Tonight, we're talking about an HOA security guard who pulled a gun on a black woman in her own driveway, not knowing she wasn't just a homeowner, but an FBI tactical commander. And when I tell you his little power trip almost ended his entire career, you're gonna want to hear every second. This story is more than one wild confrontation. It's about how quickly things can flip when somebody with a fake sense of power goes too far. It's about race, fear, and what happens when somebody who never should have had a gun in the first place decides to use it. Think about it. A black woman just getting home after a long shift at work. She's tired. She's ready to relax. But before she even makes it to her front door, she finds herself staring down the barrel of a gun from a man who has no idea she's not just any woman but a federal agent who leads tactical operations. This is the type of story that shows us the bigger picture, the risks of living in HOA communities, the reality of being black in America, and the ugly truth about how people with a little bit of power can become the biggest threat. Let's go back to that night. Picture this in your head like you're watching it in slow motion. It's late. The streets are empty. The glow of porch lights is the only thing lighting the neighborhood. She pulls into her driveway, turns off the car, and takes a deep breath. A long day behind her. She's not in uniform. She's not holding her badge. To anyone watching, she looks like just another woman coming home. But to one man, she looks suspicious. And that one man has a uniform of his own, not a police uniform, not military. He's HOA security, which is basically a badge you can buy if you want to feel powerful without having to pass the real tests. And instead of walking up and asking her a question, instead of calling for backup, instead of even stopping to think, his hand goes straight to his gun. Now ask yourself, why? What made him see her as a threat? What made him think the only answer was violence? That's the challenge at the heart of this story. Because this isn't just about one security guard. This is about how HOAs hire people who act like police without the training. It's about how black women and men are treated as threats before they're treated as neighbors. And it's about how bias, fear, and power trips can turn an ordinary night into a life-or-death situation. To really understand how serious this was, let's break down a few things. First, HOAs. If you've never lived in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, let me tell you, they run everything. They decide the color of your house, how tall your grass can be, what kind of car you can park in the driveway. They fine you for leaving your trash out too long. They can sue you. And in some places, they even bring in security patrols. Now here's the issue. HOA security is not police. They don't go through the same training. They don't carry the same accountability. They're usually private contractors with just enough authority to act like they run the streets, but not enough discipline to know when they've gone too far. That's where this guard comes in. He's not sworn in. He's not held to the same standards, but he's got a gun, a flashlight, and a chip on his shoulder. And when he sees a black woman pulling into her driveway late at night, that chip turns into an excuse. He doesn't know her, he doesn't ask questions, he doesn't even stop to think maybe she lives here. He jumps straight to force. And that's where things turn dangerous. See, this isn't happening in a vacuum. This is happening in a country where black people have been labeled suspicious in their own neighborhoods for centuries. Where "you don't belong here" is a phrase that too often ends with violence. Trayvon Martin was walking home. Ahmaud Arbery was jogging. Adiana Jefferson was playing video games with her nephew in her house. And every time, somebody decided they were a threat and pulled the trigger. This story is different only because of one thing. This woman wasn't just anybody. She was an FBI tactical commander. But here's the question that should haunt you. If she hadn't been, how would this story have ended? Picture this moment again, but in slow detail. The woman steps out of her car. The night air is still, just the sound of crickets. She grabs her bag, maybe scrolling her phone for a second. Out of the corner of her eye, she notices movement, a man walking toward her. Her body tenses. She doesn't know if he's a neighbor, someone lost, or worse. But then she sees it, the gun, pulled halfway from its holster, pointed in her direction. Her training kicks in. Her breathing slows, her muscles steady. She knows she can't make a sudden move. She knows one wrong twitch could be the last. And the guard, he's standing there, chest puffed out, thinking he's about to stop some intruder. This is where you realize the imbalance of power. Not real power, imagined power. The guard is using fear. She's holding onto discipline. And in that clash, the truth comes out. Cliffhanger tease midway. And if you think that's the wildest part, wait until you hear what happened when she calmly told him exactly who she was. His entire world flipped upside down in one sentence. Now let's zoom out again, because this isn't just a one-off story. How many times have we seen people like this? Security guards, neighborhood watch volunteers, off-duty officers, people who think the badge or the gun makes them the law. George Zimmerman wasn't a cop, but his little neighborhood watch badge made him think he had the right to chase down a teenager. How many stories end before they even make the news because somebody looked suspicious? That's why this one is so chilling. Because the only reason it didn't end in another name on a hashtag was because she had the training, the calm, and the title of FBI Tactical Commander to shut it down. But here's the real truth. Authority shouldn't be the only thing that saves your life. Humanity should, respect should, but too often that's not the case. Now back to the driveway. The guard is still holding his gun, trying to figure out who this woman is. And then she speaks. Her voice steady, calm, commanding. She doesn't shout. She doesn't beg. She says exactly who she is, an FBI tactical commander. Imagine the silence after that. Imagine the weight of those words hitting him like a brick. The man who thought he was in charge just realized he threatened a federal agent. A woman with more training, more authority, and more power than he will ever have. His confidence crumbles. His hands shake. And the gun that made him feel big a second ago now feels like a death sentence for his career. That's the moment the power flips. That's the moment the wannabe cop gets exposed. So what do we learn from this? This wasn't just one bad night. This wasn't just one bad guard. This was a mirror held up to the bigger issue. Because if she hadn't been FBI, if she had just been a regular woman coming home from work, we might be talking about her in the past tense. We might be saying her name as another victim of bias and reckless behavior. And that's what makes this story both terrifying and telling. HOA security isn't police, but they act like it. They're given just enough power to make them dangerous, but not enough oversight to keep them in check. And when you mix that with racial bias, what you get is nights like this, where somebody comes home from work and ends up staring down a gun in their own driveway. This woman walked away safe, but only because of who she was, and that should scare all of us. Because safety shouldn't depend on titles, it should depend on respect. But here's the thing, walking away safe doesn't mean walking away unchanged. Imagine closing your front door after a night like that. You drop your keys on the counter, but your hands are still trembling. You sit on the edge of your couch, shoes still on, staring at the wall. The silence feels loud, and you're left asking yourself, what if I hadn't said anything? What if he had fired before I spoke? What if my badge hadn't been enough? Even when you survive, the weight of almost dying never leaves. That's what people don't understand. For so many Black people, making it home safe isn't just a phrase. It's a prayer. It's something you whisper before you walk out the door, before you drive through a stoplight, before you get pulled over. Because you know that in this world, one wrong move, one wrong glance, one wrong assumption, and it could be over. For her, that night didn't just end with relief. It ended with responsibility. Because when you're in her position, when you carry the weight of being both a black woman and a federal agent, you know your survival can't just be for you. It has to mean something. She could have filed a report. She could have pressed charges. She could have used her authority to make sure that guard never carried a weapon again. But the question is, does she? And here, where we get into something complicated, because think about it, even with all her power, even with the weight of the FBI behind her, going after this guard wouldn't be simple. HOAs protect their own. Security companies protect their employees. And when race is in the mix, accountability becomes a maze. So now she's left with another question. Do I fight this battle? Or do I move on, grateful to be alive, but haunted by the knowledge that someone else might not be so lucky? Now let's flip it. What about the guard? The man who thought he was in control until the truth smacked him in the face. You have to wonder, did he walk away that night ashamed, embarrassed, or did he walk away angry that his authority got challenged? That's the danger with people like him. Sometimes being exposed doesn't humble them. It makes them double down. It makes them more reckless the next time. But here's the twist. This time the story didn't stay in the dark. Word got out. Neighbors talked. Social media picked it up. And once that happens, the guard can't just walk away quietly. His name gets attached to something bigger than himself, the symbol of what happens when wannabe cops play with power. Now let's talk about the neighborhood. See, an HOA community thrives on the idea of safety. That's the whole selling point. The gates, the cameras, the patrols. Families pay thousands of dollars every year for that illusion. So when one of those patrols pulls a gun on an innocent homeowner, the illusion cracks. Neighbors whisper, if it happened to her, could it happen to me? Others defend the guard. Well, he was just doing his job. And then there are those who stay silent, because silence is easier than facing the truth. But here's the thing. This story doesn't just divide a neighborhood. It forces them to look at the truth they don't want to see. That safety isn't equal. That security doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. That some people can pull into their driveway at night without a second thought, while others pull in with their heart pounding, praying they make it inside alive. And if you think this was an isolated incident, let me remind you of another story. Remember Ahmaud Arbery, a black man jogging in a Georgia neighborhood. 3 white men, not cops, just self-appointed neighborhood protectors, chased him down and killed him in the street. Their excuse? He looked suspicious. Sound familiar? The same mindset, the same dangerous mix of bias and power. The difference? Ahmaud didn't have a badge to protect him. He didn't get to walk away. That's why this FBI commander's story matters so much. Because her survival shows us what happens when bias collides with power, and how different the outcome can be when the person targeted has authority to fight back. But ask yourself this: why should it take a badge to make someone's life worth sparing? Let's go deeper into the problem. HOAs aren't just about property values and rules. They're about control. And when control is unchecked, it turns into abuse. Who checks the HOA guard when he steps out of line? Who reviews his training? Who makes sure his gun isn't pointed at the wrong person? The answer, usually nobody. And that's where the danger lies. Because while real police have oversight, body cams, internal affairs, HOA guards operate in the shadows. No cameras, no accountability, just their word against yours. So when you put a gun in their hands, you're not just giving them power. You're giving them the ability to take a life without the systems in place to stop them. Now let's go back to her for a moment. Because as she sits in her house, the adrenaline slowly fatting, she knows one thing for certain. She can't stay quiet. Not because she wants revenge, not because she wants to make headlines, but because silence could mean the next person doesn't survive. So maybe she calls a meeting with the HOA board. Maybe she lays it all out, the danger, the bias, the recklessness. Maybe she reminds them that she isn't just a resident. She's someone trained to recognize life-and-death mistakes, and what she saw wasn't just a mistake. It was a crisis waiting to happen. And here's the kicker. They can't ignore her, not when she speaks with authority, not when her words carry the weight of the FBI. But again, why should it take that kind of authority to be heard? Think about Aditiana Jefferson, a 28-year-old black woman in Texas playing video games with her nephew. A police officer shot her through her own window, claiming he thought she was a burglar. She didn't get to explain who she was. She didn't get to reveal her title. She didn't even get to stand up. And that's the chilling part. This FBI commander's survival isn't just luck. It's privilege, not racial privilege, but occupational privilege. A title that made her dangerous enough to be spared. But how many Aditianas never get that chance? Now, let's circle back one more time to the guard. What happens to a man like that after being exposed? Best case scenario, he gets fired. The HOA cuts ties, the security company lets him go, and he disappears into another job. Worst case scenario, nothing happens. He keeps his gun, he keeps his patrol, and the next time he feels suspicious, it doesn't end with a reveal, it ends with a shot. That's the part that should keep you up at night. Because without accountability, history has a way of repeating itself. At the end of the day, this isn't just about one guard, one woman, or one night. It's about a system where safety is conditional, where some people get the benefit of the doubt and others get a gun in their face, where authority is respected only when it's backed by a title, not by humanity. This woman's story matters because it shines a light on the cracks in the system. But the scarier truth is how many stories like hers we'll never hear, because they didn't end in survival. And if you think this story was shocking, wait until you hear about what happened in another HOA community, where a black family faced threats not just from guards, but from their own neighbors. The fight for safety inside these gated walls is darker than you think. If you got value from this story, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next.